By now, you've probably heard about a Japanese Spider-Man. Be it the Toku series, small manga tie-ins, or the short-lived manga-verse counterpart, Spidey has had his fair share of glorious Nihon. But what if I told you there was a Spider-Man manga that Marvel doesn't want you to see? One that stopped publishing in America because it was too much for them. We are going to go on a wild ride through 3 of the Spider-Man manga's most infamous tales to see just why exactly Disney does not want you to see this side of everyone's favorite web-slinger. Before we go any further, I should get this out of the way. This manga was written in the 70s, and early on it loosely adapts some stories from the 60s, the very beginning of Spider-Man's history. And from there, it takes its own wild and weird direction. But we'll get into all that as we go through the story. There's no better place to start off than the first story of manga Spider-Man. Except this isn't Peter Parker we're talking about. This is Komori Yu. There's no Uncle Ben, there's an Aunt May, but honestly, she is just in there for a few panels early on. She disappears pretty quickly. The wrestling match doesn't exactly happen, but there is a story that involves wrestling. I don't know whether that's coincidence or not, but either way, it's Spider-Man gets his suit, he gets his powers in much the same way. He also doesn't have to deal with any bullshit organic webs. He's got traditional Spider-Man web shooters. Pretty average, pretty normal right now. He rides a motorcycle, but that's not important until later. Honestly, the way that Spider-Man's origin goes down in the manga is pretty similar to how it goes down in the actual comics. Yu kind of just gets his web shooters and costume immediately after getting his powers, and both take up about a page of this. The difference lies with the story immediately following that. While the first issue of Spider-Man was a morality tale about power and responsibility, the manga takes it a bit differently. We begin the real story when Yu gets a letter from his pen pal, Rumi, asking him to meet in person. Yu is ecstatic at this offer. I finally get to see the Rumi who I've only seen in pictures. But before Yu can meet his unseen sweetheart, he runs into our first villain. I'm sorry, but this costume of mine can easily open any vault. Call me Electric Man, Electro. This is the very first villain that Yu-Man fights here. And while Electro is still one of the most recognizable rogues in the Spider-Man's gallery, they're opting for him over characters like Chameleon, since he was like the first supervillain that Spider-Man fought, and Doc Ock, since he was a much more prevalent villain in the Spider-Man mythos. Regardless of the reason, Electro may be a strange choice, but it's not a bad choice. And at first it seems like this is going to be a pretty straight adaptation of the original Lee Ditko comics, but don't be fooled just yet. Rumi and Yu finally meet on a page that can only be described as shoujo-esque. But all is not well as Rumi tells Yu her real reason for calling him here. I know this is quick, but I have something to ask of you. Will you help me find my brother? Rumi and Yu investigate her brother's old jobs and hangouts only to discover that her brother has completely disappeared after stealing a large sum of money. The plot thickens, as it were. In anguish, Rumi confesses to Yu that her mother is in the hospital and they have no way of paying the hospital bills. Yu immediately offers to help pay the hospital fees, but first he'll need a job. And of course, where does any good Spider-Man go to get a job? At the Joho Newspaper Corporation, of course, complete with its own Japanese version of J. Jonah Jameson. And of course, like any good Daily Bugle counterpart, these guys have a bit of a fixation on supervillains in their newspaper. Ah yes, of course, $1 million to whoever captures the Electric Man Electro alive. This evening's edition is gonna be good. Seeing this as a chance to pay for the hospital fees for Rumi's mother, Yu confronts Electro face to face. Despite trying his best, Yu-Man fails miserably against Electro, as Electro escapes with a van full of money, killing several police officers. Just fucking killing them. After escaping, we see Electro return home with his accomplice, and we learn more about his origin. Let's stop doing this right now. Stand in there and I'll remove the electrification devices and restore you to normal. What? I promised myself when you made me the Electric Man that I'd become the richest man on Earth. It's here that the reader learns that Electro was created and assisted by an out-of-work electronics professor who turned to a life of crime after getting no recognition in the field of electronics. Electro becomes more indiscriminate with his attacks, stealing from a women's clothing store that you and Rumi just happened to be at. You know, you already got the banks, next step is the woman's clothing. And of course, you leaps into action. It's Spider-Man. You're right. He has the abilities of a spider with 1,000 times the power. As you man and Electro battle, Electro fires a bolt of lightning out the window, hitting an unintended target. Electro kills the professor that created him and also the only person that could take away his powers. And Electro blames you for the death of the professor and goes to attack him, but with one well-placed punch, you send him flying backwards, knocking Electro unconscious. Unconscious for about 2 seconds, you'll see. Going to Electro's body, you get the shock of a lifetime. Fucking hell, that's bad. That's not possible. Rumi's brother. Electro that explains while working at an auto shop, he accidentally handicapped a child. After realizing that he would be paying the child's hospital fees for the rest of his life, Electro tried various ways of making money fast until he agreed to be experimented on by the child's father, our now deceased electronics professor. Everything was going fine, if only you hadn't shown up. What have my superpowers done? Much later, Yu talks with Rumi after giving her the money for her mother. Rumi, what about your brother? Yu, don't talk about my brother that Spider-Man killed anymore. My brother was just a misfortunate young man. And so our hero is left alone once more. Our story ends on a very somber note of Spider-Man alone. And it's an excellent introduction into the strange world of the Spider-Man manga. In comparison to the first Electro story in the comics, so much more depth is added to both of them actually. And Electro was given a backstory that really wasn't seen in the 60s comics that this is adapted from. The lead Ditko story is much simpler. Electro got his powers from an accident with electrical wires, and he just decided to become evil. The manga tries, to varying degrees of success, to make Electro the victim of circumstance. Spider-Man issue 9 ends with Peter Parker hopefully hooking up with his hot older secretary. The manga's first chapter ends with Yu's love interest saying that Spider-Man killed her brother and she doesn't know when he'll be able to pay back his $1,000,000. Add on top of that later on we find out that Yu was too late and Rumi's mother ends up dying anyways. This is fucking depressing. But it is only the start of how depressing the Spider-Man manga gets. We're going to be skipping over a few chapters, but believe me, there are some gems in here. There's the Lizard brutally killing his wife, Mysterio ruining Spider-Man's reputation, bizarre dream sequences, and Yu being falsely accused of rape. Also, a soldier from Vietnam with severe PTSD hijacks a plane. This is in the Spider-Man manga. I'm skipping over all of that because the next story is even more amazing. You see, at this point, the Spider-Man manga had changed writers and was actively moving away from American supervillains and towards the darker elements of Japanese subcultures. The writer from Chapter 6 onward is Kazumasa Hirai, famous creator of Wolf Guy, and the artist remains Ryoichi Ikegami, better known as the creator of Crying Freeman. If you know anything about either of those two through their various adaptations, then you would know that this combination of writer and artist are a perfect fit for each other, and a horribly perfect fit for Spider-Man. Hirai and Ikegami's work touches on a wide array of dark themes and subject matter. Having them make a manga together makes sense. Having it be a Spider-Man manga is completely out of left field, but seeing how Spider-Man is built around making Spidey suffer, it's almost too perfect. So let me catch you up on the story a little bit. Rumi has left Yu's life in order to become, as the story puts it, a go-go dancer. And now Yu is desperate to win her back. He is so desperate, in fact, that the chapter starts with Yu literally masturbating as he pines after Rumi. This is how the chapter starts. Not to mention, Yu's fantasies get on the more rapey side of things. Thankfully, Yu is disgusted by this behavior, saying to himself, "I'm a dirty person. I'm just a lump of impure desires. All I care about is girls. Rumi, at this rate, my impure nature may come out eventually." While in this depressive funk, Yu meets a delinquent classmate, Inumaru. Somehow impressed at how Yu has gone from science bookworm to depressive teen, Inumaru invites Yu to his hangout in Shibuya. "Why don't you come down sometime? There's plenty of fun things there. I'll show you the ropes." This isn't important to the main story, but I think we need to talk about how this manga asks why hasn't Spider-Man ended Vietnam? As Yu wanders into a bad part of town, he's assaulted. Just as he's about to stop holding back his strength and kick their asses, Inumaru steps in. "Fucking idiots! Put away your knives! This is my buddy, you blockheads!" Inumaru takes Yu back to his place, lets him take a shower, and gives him a new suit, fully transforming Yu into a Yakuza sub-story. With this new suit, Yu goes back to the go-go bar that Rumi is working at. However, things don't go as Yu intends. Yu sees Rumi leaving with a strange older man and tries to stop her, but ultimately fails as Rumi takes off in his car. Inside the car, there's this exchange. "I'm sorry I had to ask that of you, manager." "I don't mind. But don't you think that was a little hard on him?" "It's fine. It's better for him anyways." "But don't you like that kid?" So distraught is Yu over seeing Rumi leave with an older man that he begins to completely trip out. No way. There's another man in Rumi's life? Whoa, what's going on here? Where am I and what the hell am I doing here? Yu wakes up back at Inumaru's apartment, and we see that the drug sequence was brought on by, quote, a little bit of marijuana. That's right, this whole trip was brought on by weed. I don't know what kind of weed Yu was smoking, but I'm pretty sure it was laced with drugs. Now, at this self-described marijuana party, 2 members of Inumaru's gang take an unnamed girl into the back room with the intention of raping her. Now, if this story took place in the Marvel Universe, Peter would jump into action and save the day without a second thought. But we're not in the Marvel Universe, are we? I'll let Yu describe his feelings about the potential rapist next door, as he waits for an awfully long time to step in. "Women are all the same. No, so are men. And so am I." Yu trips out again, but when he finally regains some semblance of control, he decides to finally burst into the room, interrupting the imminent rape. Impressed that Yu managed to stop 2 of his cohorts from raping a girl, Inumaru makes Yu an offer. "So, you want to team up with me? Team up. Become my partner. Make some money. I'm sure we'll be successful. What do you say? What could we do?" "I'll tell you eventually. Let's go to sleep. The sofa's really comfy." Inumaru takes Yu to a club where they meet up with Chico, one of Inumaru's non-rapist friends. However, as Inumaru leaves the 2 of them alone, Chico gives Yu a warning. "Yu, do you know what kind of person this Inumaru is?" "No." "Inumaru's a dangerous person. Do you know what he's gone to get now? Marijuana." Chico convinces Yu to leave before Inumaru can get back, but as they do, the 2 of them run into a group of thugs. Back at the thugs' hideout, they reveal that Yu and Chico are being used as hostages as their gang negotiates with Inumaru. But this wholesome hostage situation quickly turns bad as the thugs make Chico strip for them. Yu watches as his Spider-Man kill boner gets harder and harder. With the proportional strength of a spider, Yu delivers a very swift knee to the dick on one of the thugs and tells Chico to get out of there. After escaping himself, Yu finds an alleyway and changes, for the first time in 130 pages, into Spider-Man. While Yu is basking in the glory of returning to Spider-Man for a 3rd time, Inumaru has a standoff on a beach in a scene that looks like it was ripped straight out of a Yakuza movie. But the deal goes wrong and the tables have turned on Inumaru. But interestingly enough, because this story does not take place in America, Inumaru is the only one with a gun. Opting to safely pelt Inumaru with rocks, the gang members chase him down until there's only 1 bullet left. Just after Inumaru makes his first kill, Yu-Man drops in to take care of the rest of them. But even after saving Inumaru's life, Yu doesn't quite get the thank you he's expecting. As Inumaru drives away, we listen to Yu lament that he couldn't stop his friend from traveling the road to self-destruction. The chapter ends with Inumaru crashing his car in the midst of fleeing the police. And it's at this point that I think I need to mention this is a Spider-Man story. Around the same time, the comic started dealing with drug use in a storyline called The Green Goblin Reborn. That more involved Peter's friend, Harry Osborn, getting hooked on drugs. And I don't think Marvel ever would have made it so that it was about Peter lighting one up, going on multiple drug trips while whining about the evils of humankind. Let alone a scene of him masturbating to Mary Jane at the beginning of it. Also, Yu being Spider-Man has become completely incidental to the story. It is now just an excuse for him to punch harder than everyone else. The Spider-Man costume is barely even in the story except for the beginning and end, but in a way that almost makes it more special. When the Spidey suit is out, you know the shit is going down. Once again, we'll be skipping over another story. This time, just one where Spider-Man has to fight a snow ghost. I know it sounds interesting. It's not. It's one of the more boring stories. But this will be our last tale. This is not the end of the manga, but it does tie up a very important plot thread. Not letting up on any of the despair, the chapter immediately starts with Rumi about to be raped in the back of a car. And then something unexpected happens. Rumi has been hospitalized after a car accident and is in critical condition, but she is not dead. Police officer informs you that this was no accident, and that there's been a serial vehicular manslaughterist out there, intentionally making people crash. But more importantly, you gets to read Rumi's diary and learn that she still loved him all along. All this time, she still had feelings for him, but thought herself too impure for you, which is ironically the same feelings that you had been feeling about himself. With this knowledge in mind, this could be a brand new day for both of them. They could finally overcome their personal issues and Rumi dies. In true Peter Parker fashion, Yu's girlfriend dies. And so, in typical Japanese superhero form, Yu takes to his motorcycle. His plan? To be the one to catch Rumi's killer, the Mad Demon, on motorcycle. And to accomplish this, Yu is taken under the wing of a cyclist called Mr. Taki. Alright, I'll teach you everything I know. Now, it all depends on whether you can keep up with the training. And I think you can already tell where this is going. Spidey jumps on his motorcycle and catches up to the Mad Demon, only to learn the horrible truth when it's too late. No, Taki is not the Mad Demon. Yu keeps up the chase, eventually landing on the demon's car. It is there that he confirms his worst suspicions. Taki is indeed the Mad Demon, and his motive is simple. I won't stop, because there's no game in a world as fun as this. As Taki explains the joy of killing innocent drivers, Yu eventually breaks down. Shut up! You wouldn't understand the sorrow of a man whose girlfriend was killed! Taki realizes now, not only was Yu Spider-Man, but the full scope of the effects his actions have had. And it's then that Taki decides to end it all by driving off the road. If you don't want to die with me, jump off! No! And we end with Taki taken out by a police helicopter, not even managing to avenge his girlfriend. Yu has also lost a valuable mentor. Now, to call upon comparisons again, when Gwen Stacy died, it was a supervillain deliberately killing her because of Peter. It was partially Peter's fault and something that he has to live with for the rest of his life. Gwen's death is one of the most tragic comics in history. I'm going to argue that this is worse. Rumi is a victim of circumstance. She is intentionally killed, but chosen completely at random. There's no way Yu could have stopped this, but he still feels responsible because he let Rumi slip so far out of his life. Unlike Gwen, there is no grand drama around Rumi's death. There's no long-standing feud between two opponents. If it wasn't going to be Rumi, then it would have just been someone else. The tragedy of Gwen's death is that Peter could have stopped it. The tragedy of Rumi's death is that no one could have prevented it. And this will be our last story in the Spider-Man manga. And I urge anyone that's interested to read the rest of it, because there is some insane shit that I just didn't have time to put in here. The Spider-Man manga is a interesting nugget of people given complete control and basically writing whatever they wanted. Marvel published some of the early chapters, but stopped before it got really dark. So now that Spider-Man's entered into the MCU, it's the perfect time to bring back this old classic. Everyone knows about the Toku. This is completely untapped material. Make the next Spider-Man movie entirely about the Inumaru story from the Spider-Man manga. People will praise it like the next Dark Knight. Include Rumi as the next love interest in order to fulfill your diversity quota. Show us a scene of Spider-Man jacking off and smoking weed in the next Avengers. We are missing out on a wealth of background for the character. Or, at the very least, finish what you started publishing, Marvel. It's better than most of the shit that you're putting out now for Spider-Man.